Investment advisory services offered by Pryor McCormick Investments, an Alabama registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Stern AG Financial Services Incorporated. Member FINRA SIPC. Pryor McCormick Investments and Stern AG Financial Services Incorporated are not affiliated companies.
It's 5:35. Welcome back into the show. Time for our weekly appointment, our weekly money checkup with our good buddy Steve Pryor with Pryor McCormick. People just love it when you come on, man. They're learning. People email me all the time and say, "I'm just learning." He's just so calm and so smooth. He knows what he's talking about.
They need to talk to my wife about that calm and smooth part. But I will say, in the last couple of weeks and in the next coming week or so, we've had actual meetings with listeners on this show, and you guys were bragging about how great the listeners were before we ever came on. But now that I'm getting to meet some of them, one of them became a client this morning. As a matter of fact. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, it really is good. It's a different kind of group that we're talking to. But it's been a pleasure. It's a great thing. And, I sort of hate to break into, we got so much going on. Being a big Alabama fan, the Fluker thing is an issue for me.
Yeah, did you hear some of that? That's kind of a bombshell in this state.
But I know what's going to happen, though. There was a recent case, and forgive me, I'm not big enough fan to remember. Some other school had the same kind of guy dead to rights, but they determined that there was no way the university could have possibly known it was going on.
Yeah, it's a matter of
happened.
Yeah, it's a matter of the quote institutional control, or whether
Absolutely.
they had, and I don't want to get into NCAA bylaws.
Yeah. But it's also Bear Bryant's 100th birthday, which is
how
a
about that?
much bigger deal for me. And then 9/11, as I mentioned to you a minute ago, my wife and I sat up last night, watched every second of Zero Dark 30 again. So I'm really fired up today.
What a compelling movie.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, it just brings it all home. And that's the behind the scenes. I got caught up in one of the video montages this morning and just couldn't. I had an appointment to be at. I had things I couldn't stop. It was the Fox montage. They play it every year, and I've seen it 5 or 6 times. I could not stop watching that sequence of events and remembering how horrified we were. But, a lot's going down. Let's talk about our stuff. And by the way, let me remind the audience, Steve does take calls. I know a lot of you like to sit back and listen during this short segment, but bring what you got. If you've been watching the news, trying to make sense of stuff, bring it. That's why he's here. We're here to just kind of educate. But all these years later, here we are still, Steve, watching world affairs, and this situation with Syria, it does play into the markets and what's going on with people's money, because one day we're going to war and oil goes up, markets go down. The next day we got peace in the news, markets go back up because there's not going to be a shooting war, oil goes back down. And this stuff, I know it's a daily back and forth, but I guess it's good to at least have seen some recovery in the markets over the last few days.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the markets were really concerned we're going to start a shooting war we didn't know how we're going to get out of. This week, things look like we're not going to do that, this afternoon. You just don't know what the administration is going to do tomorrow. But I tell you, the only thing for me, anyway, worse than watching all this stuff go on and see the money wasted in this kind of thing is to know that that's partially my money. That's what my money is going toward. And way back in the day, I first learned that just make all the money you can and pay whatever tax you have to and move on. But it's gotten to the point now where you really have to pay a lot more attention to taxes in your investing. And just some simple things, and I just wanted to kind of mention a couple things today because you can really make a difference. If you've got some IRAs, a 401k, or regular money, we would call outside of that, non-qualified money, and you've got stocks, bonds, cash, it really can make a big difference to you in which account you hold those investments. It can really make some difference long term in how you come out with your money. But I want to make a couple of points first. For starters, we're not CPAs. Pryor McCormick gives no tax advice. There's no way we would do that. But if you don't have a CPA already, a good, competent CPA that will talk to you about issues like this, then you ought to get one. And if you have a good CPA who can help you with this stuff, make sure he's talking to your financial advisor. And if you're doing your own taxes and your own financial advice, either come to me and let me hire you or wise up and hire a professional.
It makes total sense to get the professional advice and merge the two schools of thought and have the best strategy to and we're not saying avoid taxes, but yeah, avoid. I mean, why have that liability if you without making some foolish mistakes and cost yourself money down the road?
The classic is you want to avoid taxes, exactly like you said, which is perfectly legal, and not only legal, but it is your civic duty. It's your patriotic obligation, because when Congress creates these loopholes in the law, then it's some kind of thing that they expect you. They want you to take advantage of that. So it's your civic duty to pay as little as tax possible. Now, that's tax avoidance. Now, what you don't want to do is tax evasion.
Sure. Where you owe it and you try to hide from it.
Yeah, you can't earn as much from inside a prison, so your taxes go way down.
But I think it's good for the country for you to limit your tax liability, because it starves the beast a little bit, and and ultimately we're all better off if we don't throw more good money after bad. But let's just put it on a personal level. Just pre-planning and parking your money in the appropriate places. You know, you've educated me, Steve, on the fact that I don't pay enough I don't pay enough attention to inflation and when in my calculations. And so you also need to think about taxes are going to come out of this stuff at some point somewhere down the line. So to know what you're really going to have to live on, you better calculate that in.
Absolutely. You take just a CD or something like that. I mean, when CDs are paying 10% in the future, which it probably will in sometime in the next 10 years, if they pay 10%, then you still have to pay taxes on that, plus inflation erodes it, and your actual return may only be half of that. But with CDs paying 1% or less, then that's a guaranteed loss every year. Couple of big concepts I want to get to. For starters, is technically what you really want to look at is take your most tax inefficient investments, and by that I mean things that no matter what you do, you're going to owe tax on. Things like real estate trusts.
Right.
They are very tax inefficient.
What do you mean by tax inefficient?
That means that they spin off income and capital gains whether you want them to or not, and it's not long term. The best tax rate you can possibly have is tax free, of course, but tax long term capital gains, where you buy something, you hold it for a long time, you sell it for a gain years from now. The highest tax on that is 20% of the gain. That's the biggest tax you can get. If you made the same amount of money either by earning it or by getting interest or some payment from a real estate investment trust,
rent or whatever, because it comes in on a regular basis,
then exactly. Yeah. And the top rate there is double. It's 39.6 or whatever. It's almost so. It really matters if you can hold that real estate investment trust in something that's tax sheltered, like an IRA or 401k. That's what you want to do. In general, that's the way to do. And secondly, and please, nobody miss this point, you never want to buy any investment purely for the sake of taxes. You never do. I mean, way back in the bad old days in the 80s, I recall there were tax shelters sold that their main attraction was that you got 3 times your investment as a write-off. You put $10,000 in, you got to write $30,000 off your taxes. Well, guess what? I don't know any of those that ended up making money. Most of them lost all the money.
That was avoidance of liability rather than growing? Is that the concept? I mean,
yeah, I think the technical term for that is stupid.
No, okay, all right. Let me write that down. That's a complicated word. It really sounds like it. I mean, is that day over though? Tax a lot of
that day is over.
Yeah,
the whatever it was, Deficit Reduction Act or whatever of 1986, or I'm embarrassed to say I remember that pretty well.
I was in high school, whatever. No, I'm just kidding. I do remember
Jim McCormick of Pryor McCormick was 7.
He was a kid. Yeah, but I remember the word tax shelter. I remember the adults around me talking about it. Got to shelter your money. Got to shelter your money. It was in movie scripts and plots, and then about the mid-'80s, it was enough of that, and so it was over.
Yeah, you remember the real estate savings and loan tragedy.
SNL,
that's part of that.
Silverado, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, basically, people's lives financially break down into 2 categories. One is the accumulation phase. That's when you're saving your money and investing, and you're working, and you're putting it aside. That's stack the cheese as high as you can. The big deal there is you just want to defer the gains. You want to put your money in things like IRAs, even annuities sometimes make sense, where ordinarily the money that you earn, like interest, dividends, and capital gains, you defer the tax. You're going to eventually pay tax on them. You know, I really never mind, honestly, paying tax on money I get to spend. If I'm going to spend it today, I don't mind paying tax on it. It's money that I don't spend. It's money that I save and put aside, so I don't have to go on welfare later.
Yeah.
And I have to pay tax on that each and every year. That's a killer.
So let's make it real elementary. Let me ask you some basic questions.
Sure.
I think I understand this. The purpose of being tax deferred with these type accounts is that the money can stay in there and keep growing for you, and then you're just going to pay it on the back end as you need it. Are you kind of making money off what would be your tax liability before you have to really pay it? Or?
Yeah, that's the perfect way to say it. Let's say you have a $10,000 interest or dividend gain for the year, and you owe $1,000 tax. Well, if you don't defer that, then you have to pay that $1,000 tax April 15th of next year.
Yeah.
But if you can get that inside an IRA or an annuity or 401k, then that $1,000 that eventually you're going to have to pay the government will stay in there and work for you. And if you can leave it there 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that $1,000 can really earn and eventually more than pay the tax on itself. So that's deferral. That's the idea. Just put tax off as long as possible. Now, there's one caveat that you have to be careful about, all this stuff. If you're in a relatively low tax bracket now, let's say you're 25, and you're just getting into the job market, if you're one of the lucky 25-year-olds to have a job,
sure, yeah.
and you're in a low tax bracket, you want to go ahead and pay tax on your income and investments now and save the tax deferral for other things, because if you're successful, then by the time you're 65 and want to spend that money and take it out, you'll probably be in a much higher tax bracket.
Sure.
So that's an extreme example, 25 to 65.
But on this end, I mean, you've got more, I guess, more flexibility, and there's a long time before you get to that point. So you just
yeah. Well,
how many 25-year-olds are paying attention to this conversation, though?
Every one of them I talk to.
Really?
Yeah.
The younger set is more aware of this kind of stuff?
Yes, they are, because partially they've been convinced, and I think perhaps rightly so, Social Security ain't going to be there for them.
Sure.
And that's a very real possibility. Yeah, politicians probably never let it go away, but they'll probably have to be 96 before they can get it, and it probably won't pay as much, and then you'll have to pay 50% tax on the first dollar. It'll be there, but it may not do them any good.
I have a theory, and I guess it's because I got kids in that rough age bracket, is that the economy hit their parents in their formative years while they're old enough to pay attention. They weren't 8, but they were in their teens or trying to go to college, and they watched their parents lose businesses, lose homes, not be able to pay their college. And that class of kids is going, man, you can't count on anything. And maybe that's a good thing. It'll sober them up, as opposed to a stereotype of the baby boomers is just freewheeling, spend it all, run up debt, do whatever.
Yeah, well,
and that attitude's different now.
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Compare that, don't trust anybody or anything, I'm going to have to rely on myself. Compare that to a couple of generations before, where the idea was get on with some large employer in your 20s, work at the same place, get a pension, and don't worry about anything, and it'll pay you off, and you never have to save. You go ahead and buy that bass boat, go ahead and buy the bigger house, and you can, your retirement will be there. And that really has hurt a lot of people.
You just said something that sort of it just hit a bell with me. I was thinking about Obamacare the other day, because we're coming up we're 20 days out from that thing getting implemented or so. And I was thinking about what it's doing is driving a wedge between that employer-employee relationship where you depended on your job for your health insurance. They're trying to force us on to the government, okay? So there's that, but then there's also the other aspect of the employer-employee relationship is this idea that the employer will match or help you with retirement, or that's part of the package. Are we seeing the last days of that too, where people will, if you got a match, take it, but these younger folks will have to come along and just really manage their own accounts and affairs like before, quote, fringe benefits came along? Yeah,
it may sound funny, but I'm for that. I hope that happens. The employer should never have been in this business of providing health insurance anyway.
That happened after World War II, am I crazy?
Yeah, it was basically a benefit, and it was never seen as a negative thing, but now it's proved to be a trap. And they're making inroads, the 401k markets, all the new regulations with that, and some of those are very good, by the way, for transparency. But the whole idea that the federal government can hold employers responsible, whatever happened to the idea that I've got a job I want you to do, I will pay you X amount of money per year. You do that job, you take your money and do with it as you will.
Go manage your own affairs.
Yeah, but because what's next? I mean, we've got to provide medical insurance, then we've got to do something about retirement. What is next? I mean, we've got to talk about medication, we've got to talk about a living wage. That's not right. That's
paternity
not good enough.
Leave, this leave, that leave. I mean, we're demanding so much of these people that are just trying to run a business.
Absolutely.
Does it make us, and I know we're kind of getting philosophical here, maybe we need to steer back to some more practical stuff, but does it make us, to me, it sort of restricts your independence if you're reliant on your employer as a nanny. And in addition to you do the work, they do give you the pay. Now you're demanding benefits, and well, for years up to my generation, you're expecting all this stuff, and when it's no longer there, we saw more companies today pull. I'm trying to remember the companies. I think it was. Well, I don't want to quote them but they're pulling spousal benefits because of Obamacare. They're restructuring the whole relationship, and I don't like having to go be forced over into the government system. But for everything else, I think it's healthy, like you said, for us not to be so dependent. Then you can change jobs when it benefits you. Some people stay in a job because they want to stay with their retirement plan set up. They feel like they're tied to their employer and they can't change it.
Yeah, it's not true anymore. Everything's portable. I think the major problem is it goes back to ultimate education and understanding. Our people don't understand the difference between the government system of benefits and the private system, your employer. They see it all as one big conglomeration, and that, hey, if I show up most of the time and don't get fired and don't use the wrong politically correct terms, then I've got a job and they owe me from cradle to grave. And that's part of the problem. The government officials don't understand it. And you can look at like a guy like ML at GE for a long time. It's like he's flaunting that they're getting closer and closer to that ultimate socialist. No, don't get me started.
Well, I know. I see you going in that road. Pensions have been dead for a long time, though, haven't they? I mean, what really wiped that out?
Well, pensions.
The
idea of pensions was that the company could take the money from that you contribute for retirement and that they contribute, and then they could manage that money for you. And they promised you, sort of like Social Security, promised you some amount per month for life when you reached a certain age if you stayed working there. And that worked for a long time. However, companies started realizing that that's a liability. And a lot of unscrupulous, not necessarily illegal, actions were taken to take money from that, sort of like Social Security. We got the Social Security lockbox, and we're never going to touch it.
Well, the alleged lockbox,
yeah. Now it's full of IOUs.
Sure.
And so pensions got to be less and less popular, and we ended up going to things like 401ks, where you could put your own money in and you could control it yourself. But the big deal there is it lets the company off the hook. They don't have to worry about whether you have lifetime income.
When you're gone, that goes with you, and they're done with you.
Exactly. Their responsibility is gone, and that's okay. That's another way you can judge whether you want to work for that company or not.
Is that better for the employer to have that kind of control when you're gone, too? You're not just tied to that. If the employer goes belly up years later and you're counting on them for your pension, they can't contribute to it anymore.
You do have to worry about that because there's the Pension Guarantee Corporation that's supposed to back that and pay you off if the company goes under. But right now, it's getting to be sort of like the FDIC. If everybody goes under that we're worried about, there will never be enough money to pay it off.
They can't cover it. You want to take a question? Take a couple calls?
Sure.
Here's Paul on his cell phone. What's up, Paul, on the cell phone?
Oh, just headed to the dove field, about to get a hunt in. Had a question, had a comment and a question about 401k. I have been with an employer that offered me a 401k, and I don't know if I made the right decision or not. I pretty much dropped out of it because his managing firm was just losing money, and I've found ways to invest in a Roth and actually grow that money a little bit better. What's your opinion on just a generic 401k, just hopping into it just because your company offers it?
Well, that's a great question. Things have changed a lot recently. The basic 401k is a lot more regulated, a lot more transparent. We don't really have enough time today to cover it, but I do want to get a couple of points in. Certainly look into two things with your company 401k. Ask if they match, if there's any matching funds, like there's a safe harbor provision that says they have to put in a certain amount to match the first 3% of your income. That is a boon. If they say, all right, we match 50% of the first 3% you put in or whatever it is, you have to. I mean, it would just be crazy not to put in that much because that's free money. Now, after that, you can go with Roths and things like that, and that's a wonderful thing. But the other thing I would want you to ask about with your company, ask if they have something called self-directed option or brokerage window or whatever that allows you to escape their investment choices. Your money stays in the 401k plan, but allows you to escape their investment mutual fund choices and you can manage the money however you want to manage it. We can manage it for you. You put institutional money managers on, which is what we do. That's not a plug for us. I'm just saying that's a way that you can use an employer-sponsored 401k and still invest it the way you want to. Not every company offers it. About half in America do, but it's a really good idea, and I would just call HR and ask them that.
Well, that was one of the reasons I did decide to pull out of theirs was it was very limited as far as the options I had to move money around or which investment I wanted to be in. You had 3 choices, and all of them were losing money. And the second reason was what they matched. They matched 3%, but their 3%, my 3%, every quarter it was coming back losing 14 and 16%. So, I mean, do you ever see any of those, just holding on to it, expecting it to come back? Or
That had to be something like 2008 to lose that kind of money. Because, honestly, you look at it, you put in 3%, they match it dollar for dollar. That's doubling your money instantly the day you put it in, and Warren Buffett can't do that. I mean, that's we used to tell people signing up for 401ks, there is a 1-question IQ test in the paperwork. And if they match 3%, then the question is, what's the minimum you want to put in? Well, there's only one right answer, 3%. After that, if you're concerned that they're losing money, for starters, there's a new law, this 338. Their fiduciary responsibility is to make sure there are no stinker mutual funds in there. Beyond that, if you're looking at a 401k at a company, talk to somebody like us, and we'll be happy to kind of take a look at it and see if there's anything you can do about it.
Paul, I appreciate your question. Did that answer it for you?
Yeah, it sounds like we need to do a little more research into it.
There it is. Well, see, that's the best of both worlds, Steve. I mean, that's a good answer. You can still get your match, but take control of the growth and management of it by knowing. A lot of folks just don't know. You've educated us on the show. You can control that it's your money. Even though your employer's putting the match in, you can move that thing into something that suits you better, that you think is more tolerable.
If they have that SDO, the self-directed option, and if you're an employer out there or an influential employee or something, it costs almost nothing, and most time nothing, to add that provision to a plan, and it does magic on both sides. It gives the employees a chance to invest it however they want to invest it, and they stop griping at you about the funds. And it also actually, to a small degree, but does lower the risk of the plan to the company. If I were having, and we do have a 401k at Pryor McCormick.
That makes sense. It's off their books.
Absolutely.
It's all
they
on
don't
you,
have.
Bubba.
Yeah, if you put a mutual fund in there that loses money all the time, like Paul was talking about, that's sort of on you as the employer these days.
So, HR people don't wince when you come in and say, "I'd rather," and give us the phrase again, an SDO, self-directed option.
Self-directed option is called brokerage window, some of those things. But just if they have any questions, I mean, those that get it and are familiar with it will smile and be happy about it. Those that don't get it, tell them to call us.
Okay. That's good advice. Look, the music's playing. Our time is up. It's too fast every week, Steve.
It is. It is for me.
I feel like I just learned a whole lot about every bit of that. I really do. And I hope the audience does. Tell them how to reach you if they got more specific questions about their own business.
Sure, it's 1-800-800-8761, 1-800-800-8761, or you can go online, PryorMcCormick.com.
Steve Pryor, he's our smart guy. Of course, we had Jim on last week. Jim does okay.
He's the really smart guy. He would say the same things, only twice as fast.
Oh, we had a good visit last week. Pryor McCormick, give him a call. Let him help you out. Top of the hour, 6 o'clock. Here's the news. More on that bombshell Bama story in a minute.
If you're not listening to the guys, you miss this.
My appraisal of President Obama. He's a skilled communicator when it comes to identifying a problem. So he can see an area of American life or international involvement that here's a problem, we need to do something. But he hasn't fully thought out the solution. So when it comes to Syria, it's strong to say this is a red line, and if it's crossed, then we're going to have to do something. That sounds good. Yeah. But then Syria does something, well, then he's got to do something.
Long on ideas and short on plans.
The Guys, weekday mornings, 6 to 10 on Superstation 101.
Winging it is not an emergency plan. Make sure your kids know what to do during an emergency. Who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information. A public service announcement brought to you by FEMA and the